So it is now my pleasure to introduce Alan Sackendorf, National Program Account Executive for Workday Federal, who will introduce our panel. Alan, over to you.
Thank you, Suzanne. And where'd Tish go? Did Tish want to say hi to Tish? Tish, thank you so much. You know, the one thing you didn't brag on was you're a Virginia Tech engineer. Did you say it? Well, I heard that. And then we didn't get the let's go Hokies. You didn't say Hokies. So I was looking for those two things. But anyway, thanks, Tish. It's always great to see Tish and learn from her. Good afternoon, everyone. It is an honor and privilege to kick off this conversation on the keys to career success, resilience, agility, and purpose. In today's environment, technical skills alone are not enough. We all know that. What sets professionals apart is how we adapt, how to lead with intention, and how we grow through change. This panel, an amazing panel today, will offer practical strategies to help you sharpen your skills, respond to transitions with confidence, and chart a purposeful career path. And I'm thrilled and honored to welcome Mr. Cliff Perkey, Deputy Director of Human Resources at the Defense Intelligence Agency, Mr. Ed Mornston, Deputy Director of U.S. Intelligence at the U.S. Space Force Headquarters, Dr. Nandita Balakrishnan, Director of Intelligence at the Special Competitive Studies Project, Mr. Chris Gibson, Special Advisor to the National Background Investigation Services, Office of Undersecretary of Defense, INS, and Mr. Andrew Hallman, Vice President of National Security at Leidos. I mean, what a lot of firepower on this stage today, I'll tell you that. I don't even feel qualified to even introduce you guys, but glad you guys are here. Guiding today's discussion is Elise Yanker, CEO of Collaborative Consulting. Elise brings a unique blend of strategic insight and leadership development expertise, having worked with hundreds of professionals and organizations to build clarity, capability, and high-performing teams. With decades of experience as an executive coach and organizational consultant, Elise is especially passionate about helping mission-driven leaders align their values with their work, making her the perfect moderator for today's conversation. Please join me in welcoming Elise and our very distinguished panel.
All right, thank you so much. And Suzanne, you should have told me to bring a lumbar pillow. I feel like I could have a nap in this chair. So good afternoon, everyone. I think this is the third event that I have been at like this, and I love the mix of the audience because we've got early career, we've got mid-career, and I think also some people who are later in the career. And I just want to say that if you are later in your career, statistics are showing that baby boomers are one of the top 2 talent pools currently, along with millennials. And that reskilling, being agile, pivoting is also important no matter where you are in your career. So I'm going to start with something for the entire panel. So starting big picture, what does it mean to you to be career agile in the national security space specifically? And why do you think that is so important today? I mean, given the current environment, Tish talked about the new administration, things that have just happened in the last couple of days. In this community, things often blow up overnight. So with that, let's hear what the panel has to say, and I'm going to start with Ed.
Thank you, Elise. Good afternoon, everybody. It's great to be here and be part of the discussion today. I would say, what does it mean to be career agile? We just kind of had a master class on it from Tish. I mean, she spoke about it extensively and perfectly. When I think about it, I think it's a team sport. Agility in your career, to me, immediately brings to mind that we're all part of a team. And we need to be agile as individuals, and the organizations that we're in also need to be flexible and adaptable and capable of changing. I think a really important part of what you just said, Elise, is why is that important today? And I say, simply look around. The world is agile. Our adversaries are agile. One of the acronyms that we use to describe the world situation today is VUCA, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. If we are not up to that game, if we are staid and solid in what we're doing and have no ability to adapt to stay ahead of the world, I don't think that serves the national security enterprise very well. So the single biggest reason to be agile is because our world demands that we as intelligence professionals have to be one step ahead of the adversary, and the adversary is agile.
Yeah, no kidding. All right, Cliff.
Yeah, so first, it's great to be part of this panel. It's good to see everyone. Thanks for having me, and I completely agree. I think the world is moving faster now than it ever has. I think our threat cycles are compressed, and I think our workforce models are evolving rapidly. When you think about being agile and what Tish said, it makes a lot of sense to me. We have to be flexible, and we can't get left behind. We have to be constantly thinking about what else we need to be doing differently. And so try to treat ourselves kind of like a software program. You got to constantly patch. You got to constantly be looking out for viruses, if you will. You got to be ready, and you've got to be able to adapt. And I think the biggest thing that we all have to do is acknowledge our blind spots and work to fill them.
Yeah. I love a good metaphor. Nandita.
Yes, I have to start with exactly what Ed said. I think our threat landscape is constantly changing, and we have to change with it. And on top of that is that at any given moment of time, you are going to be the next generation coming forward. So there's always someone coming after you. You are always going to be then the next step ahead. And you also want to be in a position where you can learn from those coming behind you and educate those that are coming up for you. And that, to me, is what agility is. It's being really hungry for that kind of learning. And also, if you think about the cases where you might be asked to surge, you might be asked to step up in ways that you never expected, and you always want to be able and prepared to say yes. And to me, being able to say yes without hesitation is what agility is.
Yeah, I love that. All right, Andrew, you're kind of hiding back there.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think of career agility as being highly adaptive to changing environments. And two dimensions of that. One is the changing work environment. Tish talked about the highly charged political environment we face, whether that be attacks on our intelligence community or forced retirements or voluntary retirements, some involuntary retirements, some accelerated retirements. But the work environment is changing dramatically, and businesses change. So the work environment writ large is changing pretty rapidly, and the emphasis on consolidation of our federal government workforce, our downsizing, reduced budgets, things of that nature. And then the other dimension is the changing technological and operational environment. And the technology environment, as you all know, is, and we have touched on and we'll talk about more, is, you just look at the rate of change for AI, and when you have generations are now counted in months, that exponential rate of change in technology and in the mission need to rapidly assimilate those changes of technology into our mission space and our tradecraft, that requires an adaptability and a agility in our workforce to be adaptive to those changes and to work with it. And so I think, as we've talked about, it's just even more so the need now to be agile and to be adaptive.
Excellent. I know you're going to talk more about technology. All right, Chris.
Hey, I got to get two things out of the way first. Go Hokies and go Dukes as a proud alumni of JMU and Virginia Tech. So with that being said, I know you were talking about metaphors earlier. I like to use an analogy when it comes to this, and I may be dating myself a little bit, but when I was a kid, I may have been a little bit of a nerd, and I like to read choose your own adventure books, right? You didn't necessarily know where you were going to be going based on the decision that you made. And I think what a lot of the folks are talking about here is being open to those ideas, right? Very few of us are blessed with the knowledge of where we want our career to go and where we're going to end up. And I think what we're saying is being open to those different changes and those different opportunities as they come about. Just because you think there's this idea of success out there that you have to follow, very rarely does it play out that way. So you just got to be open to what those may be.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll talk about reframing later, but that opportunity that Tish was talking about, looking at everything as an opportunity, how do you quickly reframe when something happens that you're not really happy about? Okay, so we're going to start with one of the specific questions. We're going to start with Cliff about career pathing. Funny enough, Cliff, I don't know if you know this, but when Tish was deputy director, I worked with her to bring about her vision for developing the senior executive corps. Had no training. And the mid-level, and so it was right when all the cascaded training had been put in. So DIA has made so much progress. So how is DIA approaching skill development across the workforce now? And talk about your career pathing tools and how there might be some best practices.
Yeah, so I thought a lot about this, and instead of giving you a philosophical answer and trying to break DIA speak down into a language you can all understand, I'm going to give you a couple of examples. So in DIA, we hire analysts. Obviously, it's a big part of the mission there. And as part of the talent management program, which we put in place in 2015, the analytic career field has evolved to the point where they have a robust career path from entry to retirement. So when a new analyst enters the agency, they go straight away to our PACE course, our foundational analytic course, where they get the basic skills. Then they'll spend a little time with an organization if they're going overseas, then they'll go overseas. So I was in Korea from 2017 to 2020. I was the senior agency representative out there for DIA, and every week the commander took an intelligence briefing. And every week an analyst would stand up in front of the commander and brief him. This particular commander was General Robert Abrams. You might know the tank, his family's legendary in the Army, and he was a leader that led very, very firmly. And he believed in teaching in public. So if you made a mistake in front of him, he would let you know about it. And there's goodness there because that helps everybody else not make the same mistake, right? So this analyst stepped up, and it was a very young analyst. It was a GG9, first tour, had been in country about 6 months, maybe 8 months. Stood up and gave what I thought was a really great briefing. I said, hey, wow, she's really good. She knows her talking. And it was about 11, 12-minute briefing to the commander, which is a lot of time. At the end of the briefing, the commander leaned forward, and every general officer in theater was on this call. Every senior executive affiliated with the command was on this call, and there were several intelligence agencies not affiliated with the command on this call. And he leaned forward and he said, I want to tell you something. I want everybody to listen up. And I said, oh, no. This poor analyst, I thought she did great. And he said, this is the way I'm to be briefed. The way this analyst just briefed me is the way I'm to be briefed. And he followed up later by recognizing her in public. So that was a testament to that pathing program, getting that officer ready to not only to do basic analysis and get out there, but also immediately contribute to a briefing that drove decisions from a 4-star commander. The other example is me. There's a gentleman here, Chris Ho, we work together. I spent many decades doing things that we don't talk about. And an opportunity came up, and our talent management process said, hey, make a change, do something different, stretch yourself a little bit, and I did. And when Chris and I worked together on the floor, there's no way either one of us thought we were going to be working in OHR at the time. And here we are, we both worked there. And I can tell you without that step, I wouldn't be a senior executive today.
So Cliff, a follow-up question to that is, in the pathing, career development, how do you balance urgent mission needs, things like I know when the China Mission Group was stood up, right, with longer-term talent development? Like that's a tension between the two.
Yeah, I think we have to think about it on two paths, if you will, and there's a lot more to this, but generally speaking, I think we have to think about it as that formal training you might get and that experiential training that you're going to get. And I think both of those are leadership responsibilities to make sure we're driving that to occur. So it's not just about sending an analyst out to PACE or sending an officer out to the farm. It's not about that's part of it. We have to follow that up with the experiential assignments. And so the career pathing guys do a very good job of balancing this. They show you the fundamental training that you need to get. There's optional training. We have robust leadership training in the agency to help people who aspire to lead at larger levels. And then making sure that we're positioning officers to get that experience. Like Tish said, getting out of their comfort zones, making sure they don't stay in one little area their whole career to where that's all they can do.
And I know Space Force is also doing some things, not also open to anything else that anyone has experienced that would be a best practice around this, but.
I agree with Cliff that it's a combination of experiential learning and institutional learning. You've got to get the right blend of that. But the third component is what individuals do on their own for themselves. And what I notice in the Space Force, and probably other places as well, there are untold opportunities. I mean, it's every day I get an email about a new course offering that's available online for us to take. And the Space Force has digital university that puts all this together in one place so you can find it. I think the key element for people who want to take advantage of that is mapping out the course of instruction, choosing from the thousands of courses that are available, and you do it based upon your knowledge gaps, the things that you want to learn, the things that you have found out that you need to learn, and you cobble together what is, your program of instruction. Some of that you do on your own. The other thing that we're willing to do is create the time for people to do that on duty time.
Yeah, I mean, this is also where this third piece that you've mentioned is being your own agent, right? If you, were an athlete, you would have an agent. If you're on the NFL, or if you are an actor or an actress, you have an agent. Well, in all these cases, you have to be your own agent. Anybody else have something on this? And then we're going to move to a question specifically for Ed. Okay, all right, so Ed. And I was actually thinking, I think I'm behind this question to tell you the truth, but given your expansive roles across agencies and commands, and like how many startups has this guy done? It's crazy. Within the government and military, like people don't think of startups within our space. What are the skills that have served that kind of agility and breadth?
So I think a couple of things. One, it has been an interesting and fairly expansive career. I served at NEMA when it was a young agency. It was 3 years old. I went to Army Futures Command when it was a year and a half old. And now I've joined the Space Force when it was 4 years old when I got there. So, in government institutional terms, those are all early to being part of the team. And we use startup in the government to capture that. It's, we're taking it from businesses and startups in that. And I think there are some good similarities there. But the skills that help with that, one, a high threshold for pain.
Are you a glutton for punishment?
You might draw that conclusion. The second is, to do, 7 years at NEMA NGA and then go to DIA for 5 years and then go to JSOC and then go to Army Futures Command. And now, the other skill that's necessary is to be old.
Hey now. Yeah.
Yes, experienced.
Yes.
Seasoned.
But the other thing, and again, Director Long talked about it, is what lies underneath the willingness to swim away from the side of the pool, to take a leap, to go to those new places where many times you wonder if you have the skills and the knowledge and the attributes and if you'll fit into the culture and those kind of things. One way to do that is just get over yourself and do it. But some of it is, do I know enough to join this team and contribute? So that's where some of the self-doubt comes. So I've got a little hack and a little war story, and it's really a coping mechanism for when you go into a new organization and you're the new person, and sometimes you go in and you're relatively senior, and you should be able to lead immediately upon arrival, but you've got knowledge gaps. You're new to the organization. You've got to learn and come up to speed quickly. So a coping mechanism is really a learning mechanism to rapidly gain new knowledge. When I went to, I guess I'll say, a Special Operations Joint Task Force in Afghanistan as an NGA executive, I wasn't a CT expert. I knew the command. I had never been a special operator, although I'd carried a rifle and a rucksack for a long time in the Army. So I had a base of knowledge, but not nearly enough to operate at the master's degree and PhD level that JSOC was operating at. They were doing CT at an enormous scale and speed and with precision, and I was the NGA rep as part of that team. So I'd sit in these meetings, and I had my trusty notebook, and this is the notebook. This is 2004. And the front of the notebook is, what you would expect. I'm in this meeting, I'm taking notes, I've got a to-do list. The commander said, do this, I'm writing it all down. In the back of the book, starting on the back page and working the other direction, I'm writing down all of the questions that I've got about what I just heard, but didn't have the opportunity to raise my hand and stop the meeting and say, what does that acronym mean? Or what is that concept? And how does this tie to what you said yesterday? So I knew I needed to write down these questions because, one, there were thousands of them and I knew I'd forget. So I had this running log of knowledge gaps that I had to fill. That's good. I knew what I needed to learn. I needed a way to actually learn it. So what I did every night, and the duty day was generally 0600 to 2400. It was an 18-hour day. I took the last hour of the day from 2300 until midnight to find somebody who would sit down with me and let me barrage them with questions. And I found a couple of people who were superb at it. And they tolerated me and they even encouraged me. And I would sit down with them every night and just, I'd come up with prioritized questions. And for about an hour, we would go through it. And it closed my knowledge gaps. And it was this huge way for me to learn relatively quickly. What I found out was it also helped them. It helped these two experts, and I'll name them at the end, because they had to explain things that they had long since forgotten about, and it helped them to be able to explain it. The best way to learn is to teach, so they were teaching me. I also found out that it challenged some of their assumptions. They challenged their assumptions. And then the third thing was, sometimes I'd say, hey, I heard this in a meeting, and they'd say, oh, I wasn't in that meeting. And I didn't know that the colonel had said that. So, it filled in, a knowledge gap for them. And that is how I do it today in the Space Force. It's the same thing. There's a lot that I don't understand about space intelligence, the adversary, and I'm afraid that people see me coming and I pull out my notebook and it's little Eddie Mornston coming with his 400 questions. And actually, I've never experienced that. Everybody is more than willing to be part of the education process.
I can tell you it's well worn and the clip is rusted. So I think it really is the one from the story he told. Space Force sometimes makes my head hurt. Like there are so many things I don't understand. Okay, we're going to move to Andrew. And I said we were going to pick up on your introductory answer to the agile piece, being career agile around technology is one of the topics. But national security is a field marked by so much change. There's so many variables, technologies, threats, evolving missions. How have you learned to manage ambiguity and uncertainty in your career, and what would you share with others?
I think all of us start out with the delusion that we could write a blueprint for our career, If we just follow the blueprint, we're going to be successful. And as I think all of us know, rarely does that survive first or second contact, because missions change, businesses change, bosses change, as Tish noted. And so, again, being adaptive to the environment. I found that in my career, I've learned the most, and candidly, my career has progressed the most from the jobs I didn't want to do. The jobs that were either presented to me as kind of involuntary, we're putting you in this job, or jobs of, hey, this really would be good for your career, but it didn't really fit my blueprint because it either wasn't comfortable for me, it didn't follow my notion of what I thought I would do professionally. And so, but I took advantage of them, and I learned a ton. And I think of all of those, if I were to think of what my blueprint was, not as I intended it to, but as it turned out to be, all of those really kind of strategic hops in my career were things I didn't want to do, but were huge growth opportunities, and I learned so much and I expanded professionally. But what I found was, if I could leave you all with one piece of advice, it is, because you can't map out that blueprint and you can't really follow it because it will inevitably limit you, find what your professional center is. What is the North Star on your professional compass? Use that as your blueprint, and then take advantage of those openings and those opportunities, and create the opportunities where you can to have a fulfilling career that takes you through, but really gives you those intrinsic rewards of, it satisfies me, it gives me my psychic bounce. Earlier in my career, I think where I developed my professional center was I wrapped myself around this proverb from the 15th century of do right and fear no one. And it's very broad and abstract, but really what it was in my early career of analysis, it was speaking truth to power. And some people think that's a hackneyed phrase, but I really believe it does represent what we need to be doing as an intelligence community, which is unvarnished intelligence brought to bear on our most important missions. And so a lot of my career has been fashioned around that North Star and that professional center. And it's cost me some jobs that I've really held dear, but it has also given me so much reward where I look back and I think, I'm proud of what I did, and that has carried me through. And so find a professional center, and then stretch yourself professionally, build on foundations that you already have, but grow.
No, I love that. I'm going to ask a follow-up question because you've also moved, Ed has had a lot of breadth. You've had a lot of breadth of moving in and out of government and industry. So what were some of the advantages that you found to that, and also maybe some of the challenges that might be helpful for people to hear?
Those of you who know me know I reluctantly left government in 2022, and it was one where I got a point to my career where I couldn't see a runway, where I had many more opportunities, very few opportunities to lead where I wanted to lead at the level I wanted to lead. So I really was compelled to retire, and I had a hard time with it initially. I thought, I have so many more years of fight left in me, I don't want to do this. But then I thought about it, and I thought, I've been preaching the private-public sector partnership for decades. Now is my opportunity to practice that from the private side. And in the reality, it reflects the reality, really, that for the missions that we do in the intelligence community, the innovation, the advances, the solutions that we bring to bear, they're really largely born out of the private sector. And so where I rationalized it was, I can do this from the private side, but still fulfill my career in a way that I could still advance professionally and still deliver on mission. And those of you that have or do serve in government, every day in the intelligence community and national security community, mission and that intrinsic word is given to you every day. It's natural to what we do. When you're in the private sector, it takes a little bit more work to construct what's that psychic balance and how do I satisfy myself that I'm fulfilling my sense of mission, but it's there, it's doable, and I found that in the private sector. Would I go back in a heartbeat? Absolutely. But I'm really loving what I'm doing in the commercial sector, and I look forward to many more years of that.
All right, yeah, excellent. So, I love that you talked about kind of not always having a chart, but having that grounding to know yourself, which is something I think that is so important, is to know what you really love, what you're good at, what aligns with your values. And Chris, I'm going to actually move over to you because you talked about, what was the book again you read as a kid? The adventure book?
Adventure.
I don't think I
Dungeons
had.
and Dragons.
You
don't want to be a half-elf bard?
All right, now you're going dungeon. I don't know a lot about Dungeons and Dragons, but I like Choose Your Own Adventure.
Yeah.
So you actually have an interesting experience based on your career. You actually took a positive time out, I think, for your family and stepped away from work. So how did that shift your thinking around professional development in your career?
Yeah. So since she's in the room, I got to thank my lovely wife for putting me in a position to be able to lean out a little bit. She's over there. She's got the cute little orange and blue dress next to somebody else's kids. I don't know.
I love it.
Yeah, no, there'll be a stern talking to when we get home.
We've even got pre-career here, so that's good.
Yeah. So you all may remember something happened in early 2020. It was a mixture of the snap from Marvel and the Twilight Zone, right? Where we all lost all sense of time, purpose, where we were going and what we were doing. We were in a position where I could stay at home and help out. So I left government service at that time. But I didn't stop doing things, right? There was a shift. Sometimes you're bringing your skills from home into the workplace. We got on a whole project management plan when we went home when I went home to make sure things were all hunky dory. But when I had that opportunity, I know, as Andrew was talking about, you still have cycles, right? You still have stuff opportunities to contribute. So I took a look back at my career and I was like, what caused those shifts, right? And what led to those different shifts into going from, at one point, from contractor side over to the government? Why did I make some of the career decisions I made? And it all comes down to a little bit of that North Star, right? What are the things that are driving you? I spent a lot of time doing business process analysis, transformation. It's a very fungible skill set. It can go to many different places. And I use that to drive who I would work for and the mission that they were doing, because I strongly believe in finding good mentors and following them. In spite of having worked for John for a couple of years. Hi, John. So while I was on the bench, I was maintaining those relationships with people that I'd worked with, people that I had worked for, to get a better understanding and sense of the mission that they were doing. And when the opportunity presented itself to go back into the workforce and to do something in that transformation arena, luckily, we'll talk about it a little bit later, but it was the network. And when everybody says network, they're not talking about network. They're talking about relationships and friendships and finding the people that are your people. When our kids were really little, it took us a while to find our people. You know, you'd go to one children's party and all the kids were crazy, run around all over the place, and we found some families that liked good wine and pizza, right? And so we'd finally found our people, and I think that's what's driven a lot of my career decisions, is finding your people and building out from that, finding that little kernel and using that as an opportunity, because it can be overwhelming to come into a room where you know no one and you know nothing, and to find an anchor in there. So I've used those anchors throughout my career to help drive where I was going to go.
I love that because, staying home with your kids and, the pandemic brought so many opportunities, I'll use Tish's word again, right, to all of us. Yeah. And, a lot of people have to take time out. They've got an elderly parent. Or my sister had 2 massive strokes and was a widow. And, things happen in our lives. And sometimes we have to take a pause. And it sounds like a great best practice is do some things even while you're on pause to maintain your networks, to continue skill development, to continue working so that you're ready to get back to the career.
Yeah, and I would just to add to that, retirement doesn't mean stop doing things, it means shift. Because if you just retire and you're just regardless of where you are or when you are in your career, you got to move to something rather than just sit. And that's when you start stagnating, regardless of whether you want to go back to the workforce or not.
Okay, I'm going to have an agile moment here, truth in lending. I skipped card 2. I'm like, in my head, I'm like, where's Nandita's question? Where's Nandita's question? She was on card number 2, so forgive me, Nandita. I'm coming back to you. And lucky enough, we also got a question for you on your specific topic. SCSP recently launched new micro-credentials in national security and AI. So for those of you who are unfamiliar, and I can tell you I'm in the leadership business, I did not know what micro-credentials were. So what is it? Why was it created? What impact are you hoping it's going to have?
Absolutely. So I guess I'll take a step back from the what and start with the why a little bit. So even before that, if you're talking about career agility in the sense of AI, I was a very traditional political scientist by training, did my doctorate in it, went into the agency as a very traditional political scientist, and now I work at the nexus of AI and national security. And it was because I was given the right opportunities and investment and training to do so, but also because there was a kind of an acute understanding that the world is changing and we all need to change with it. So the why of why this micro-credential was created is really on a couple of different premises. One, as I mentioned, the threat landscape is fundamentally changing, and my organization, SCSP, has long advocated to having an AI-fluent workforce that is ready to take the challenge of that on. So I'm talking about the national security professionals. I'm also talking about the federal workforce and public sector workforce writ large, but also the larger American population that has to serve different functions. Number 2, looking at the national security apparatus more generally, especially the IC, we know that AI is being deployed very unevenly across the IC, but also within work streams within specific agencies. So you might have professionals within an agency that have a lot of access to these tools and some that have very little access to these tools. I can speak from experience. When I was an analyst, I had very little access to these tools. And number 3, and just to hone in on a point that Ed made earlier, accessibility is also an issue. Some of these courses are time consuming. If you want to get upskilled and reskilled, they can be expensive. And more importantly, even if you have time and money, there are a lot of them. And sometimes picking out the one that you need to do is really, really difficult. So we took on this challenge of, if we're going to constantly advocate for an AI fluent workforce, how do we actually make tangible steps towards doing that? So back in March, we launched first our public course on Coursera's platform called AI and National Security, Integrating Artificial Intelligence into Public Sector Missions. And with this course, we had a couple of very key objectives. Number 1, we needed to make this very practical and tactical for national security professionals. You can get a lot of great foundational AI training out there, but how do you know how it's important to you as a national security professional? Second, it needs to be really pithy, 3 to 5 hours, and it needs to be a little fun. So we launched that back in March. It's completely free and available to the public. But we also realized that that is like a stepping stone. So what we did in June was launch what we call our micro-credential at the AI Expo. So think of a micro-credential as a certification that is short. It's not meant to be something that's 30 hours. This is a 3-course sequence that can take anywhere, I think, between 10 to 15 hours, depending on how quickly you can move through it. I think a couple of you in the audience have already taken it and have finished it within the 3 weeks that we launched it. So that's a testament. But basically what the micro-credential does is focus on 3 key objectives across 3 courses. The first is meant to be really, really foundational. The feedback that we got is people are coming at AI with very different experiences, and sometimes they just want to know what's the terminology I need to know. What does this actually practically look like? And what are the implications? Second course is our AI and National Security course, which really just ties, again, AI to national security. And number 3, putting those 2 courses together, how do I understand where all of this is going? When I hear things about artificial general intelligence, when I hear things about agentic AI, when I hear some of the discourse on DeepSeek and open source models, how do I contextualize all of that to understand, where do I fit in as a professional? What we hope with this micro-credential is, again, you can use the QR codes to sign up for it. It's a completely free resource to you. We've taken on that burden to help you start your AI journey. It at least gets you started. It gives you the right vocabulary that you need, and then you will then identify what it is you need to do next in your training journey, and hopefully we can also help with that as well.
I love that. And I just am going to say, when I talked to Peggy in a prep call, she is going through or may have completed. So catch her when we go to the networking hour afterwards. So as micro-learning, because a lot of people have thought about bite-sized pieces and micro-learning, and Ed, you talked about like the plethora of things that are out there, but it's becoming more common. How can individuals identify the right short-form training that align with their role and maybe their long-term goals?
Absolutely. So I guess sometimes we created this micro-credential with a very clear gap in mind that we were trying to fill, but that's not always going to be the case. So the question is, where do I start? And I think this is where I'm going to start with like kind of a word of caution, which is it is very easy, especially I think in the field of AI, but I think even more generally if you're trying to upskill yourself to kind of try to follow what's trendy at any given moment. And I personally think when you're working in a field that is very rapidly evolving, what is trendy today is not going to be trendy tomorrow, and you are potentially always going to be in a deficit. So I think what you really need to do is sit down and think to yourself, what is it that I actually need to know? Where's the technology, or what are the concepts that seem to be something that have had some longevity in my field? And what are the foundations of those concepts that I need? I would always start with something foundational for a couple of reasons. Number one, those are sometimes the like quickest and easiest things to like learn. And then second, it'll either unlock an interest in you that you didn't know you had, or second, just get you to the next step that you need to do for your training. So the way we think about our micro-credential, for example, is it's meant to be really foundational, but part of what we are offering through the Coursera platform is the ability to take other courses using the licenses that we give you as a part of the micro-credential to explore on your own. So once you finish, you will identify what it is you need to know more of, whether it's I want to actually do a deeper dive on the technology and the technical concepts, or I want to know more about the ethical use of AI. I want to know more about the economic implications of AI. Whatever it is you think it is going to be most important for you to know, at least by starting somewhere foundational, you will start your next step.
Excellent. We are going to talk about mentoring and your network as we start to wrap up the panel in a little bit. I think those are also good places to talk to other folks, your mentor, to talk to people in your network about what they might recommend, or if they know you and know what you're doing, that they might have a suggestion, because it can be very difficult to just begin. Okay. All right, so this is something for all the panelists. If you think, and we've already heard some like amazing examples of taking some bold career moves, or maybe some unwanted career moves. How does somebody go ahead and like take that jump, push off from the side of the pool, even when they feel like they're unsure or unqualified? So Ed, I'll start with you, and if we can have maybe, I know I'm probably going to be getting a card here soon, but about 2 minutes or less on this one for everybody.
I think recognizing the value of it. It's overcoming your hesitation. It's screwing up your courage so you are willing to set aside your fears. It's developing coping mechanisms like I talked about earlier. But I think, all the many varied experiences I have, that's built a network that is gigantic between active duty in the Army, NEMA and NGA, DIA, special operations, working at an NRO ground station, going to Army Futures Command as a civilian and out of the Space Force. You just by accident build networks that are, that's a lot of colleagues and people to collaborate with and people to reach out to. So I remind myself of every one of those moves connects me to a whole nother group of professionals that are amazing to work with, and I've found it all to be true. I go back to people who I onboarded with in NEMA in the year 2000. I'm still connected to some of them.
Yeah, so doing some really good self-coaching in this case. Like just do it. There are great benefits out of it. All right, Cliff, what about you?
Yeah, so I think when you think about confidence to take a big step, there's opposing forces at play there, right? Confidence is things you get from your experience, the jobs you've had or the training, and then a bold career move doesn't really often come with that confidence to do it, right? You have to think, well, is this something I can do? Like Ms. Long said earlier, don't take a job you're absolutely perfect for. You're not going to get anything out of it. So there's in the national security, the IC, there's very few jobs out there that you're expected to know everything and have all the answers the day you start. When you take a bold step and do something different, you've got to trust that the experience that you do have will get you through that as you learn those new things about the new role. In Korea, we had a senior executive position to be the senior intelligence analyst for North Korea. And we had a joint duty officer who came to that job. He came from the White House. He was the president's national security or North Korea advisor, Mr. Sid Seiler. I don't know if any of you know him. He's a genius at North Korea. He's been in North Korea. It's pretty much all he's done his whole career. But he'd never served in a combatant command before. So it was a big step for him, coming out of the White House, which is a different orbit than service at a combatant command. But he trusted his experience, and he got there, and he and I were very close when we were there, and we bounced things off of each other. But you just learn to trust your experience to get you through it, and know that bold career move is going to take you to the next level.
And you've also got a hack, right? If you're going into something that you don't know anything about, it's given you a hack. Nandita.
Sure, I think this is where it's helpful to remember that 2020 hindsight is real, where every bold career move you make, when you look back on it, seemed like the obvious choice. And how you get to, every step in your career is because not just the step you made before, but every subsequent step that came before it, or preceding step that came before it. And sometimes you make mistakes along the way, and that's very real. And I think it's always important to remember that at some point, you're going to end up where you need to be or where you want to be, or where is incredibly unexpected. And even in a short period of time, like in my case, I feel like I went from political science to AI, and I would have never expected that even a few years ago. And I've built a micro-credential around AI. And if you asked me when I was a grad student if I was going to be doing that, I would have absolutely been shocked. But you end up exactly where you need to be. And I think just being able to take those risks along the way and know that, if you don't fail, you never learn anything is also very real.
Yeah, I love that, and acknowledging those mistakes along the way, and reframing those perhaps, and looking at them as places where you learned, and maybe it was an oops, and move along. All right, Andrew.
Use this as a point to talk about mentoring, just because I think relying on a trusted mentor, informal or formal, or several, is key to have that kind of exchange and a reflection with somebody else who can challenge you. Yeah. We all tend to limit ourselves, and we all have our self-doubt about, is this a bold move I can make on my own? But the sounding board you can have from a trusted mentor is key. That was certainly instrumental in my career.
Okay. All right, Chris.
So a couple of folks have alluded to it previously. Imposter syndrome is a real thing. It's okay to feel that way. Everybody goes through it. I mean, on a daily basis, I may or may not have those thoughts. When you make that big leap, and you all will make that big leap, no one expects you to know everything, and it's okay to be curious. It's okay to ask questions. It's okay to grab people with your notebook and write down all the questions that you have about something, because there's a reason that you either were presented with that opportunity or you went and took that opportunity. And so remember that, right? And you are where you are right now because of all the decisions that you made before then that got you up to here. So you too may one day be able to get up here and sit on a panel and talk about all the great career decisions that you made.
So a question from the audience. So a college student with an IC internship, their offer is affected by the hiring freeze, which is a reality. What advice or next steps would you offer to someone around navigating that uncertainty and how to be resilient? And I'd open this up to whoever has got something to comment on that.
I'll give it a swing, I guess.
All right, thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, it's a really good question, and we have interns that are caught up in this at DIA. I would say two things. I think there's always things you can do in the interim, and have the confidence to know that at some point normalcy will return. Throughout the entire episode since January, we've had normal attrition. We've had people leaving the agency voluntarily outside of all the different offers that were given. I just said, hey, I want to go do something else. That will continue, and the mission is not going away. If anything, it's getting bigger. If you think about the priorities of the administration, those are big functions that we've never done before, and we're going to need the talent. So a little grace, we're going to come get you when we can.
Yeah, Nandita.
I think just as a very tactical thing, the skill set that you want to deploy in the IC and you want to get from the IC is relevant in a lot of different fields. So whether or not it's intelligence specifically, there's a lot of cool work being done in the private sector that I think you're going to get the same skill sets. And I think I will even argue that sometimes having the nimbility to move back and forth between the private sector and the public sector can be really helpful. So if you need to bide your time somewhere else, think big and bold. I also think it's a great chance to just think like, do I want to hone in on research skills? Like really push yourself in college to do a lot more research or learn other skills. I think, yes, it's disappointment if you can't do the exact internship that you want, but you can find those opportunities elsewhere.
Yeah, Andrew.
I would just say, following on Nandita's point is, one is persistence. Don't give up. When I first applied to the agency, I didn't get accepted the first time. I wasn't going to give up, so I came around another time. Did something else in government for a while before I did that. But two is, to your point, Nandita, is the private sector experience you get. We need a permeable membrane between private and public sector. And so if you can get that at the start, you'll be a better intelligence officer inside government if you have that experience to start with. So just consider it a temporary detour, but one that will continue on the path.
Yeah.
But be persistent.
So to look at it as an opportunity to have perhaps a blend of where you're entering.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyone else on that one?
I'd just say, as Andrew said earlier, no plan survives first contact. You got to make some shifts. If you're a member of INSA or if you're a member of a community of interest, one of the best ways of getting in is having somebody help pull you in rather than you just trying to do it on your own. So I would encourage you to do that.
I do want to get to the networking mentoring question, but I want to take one more question that was given by the audience. Again, given the current climate, and so many people taking DRP, hiring freezes, and the work's not going away, right? Mission's not going away. How do you decide to stop what's doing? I remember this being a big question always at DIA. What do you say no to? And maybe I would say even some practical advice about how do you say no to your boss, right? Or say yes and, or anything that panel would have on that.
Sometimes, I don't know how often this works out, but if they are aware of the list of your bucket, and what you're not saying is, I can't do this, but help me understand what the priorities are. Mm-hmm. What are your top three so I can focus on those things first? Hopefully you got a boss that'll listen to it and just say, don't sleep tonight, or for the next month. But working with them on that can be one way of addressing it.
Yeah, asking a good open-ended question, like what do you want me to focus on? Yeah. Right? What are your top three priorities? Yep. What else would be one, because we want to be able to give people some things that they can walk away with today. What would be another specific piece of advice that somebody could do if they really they're still there and the workload is increased?
I would just say, remember your values. I said no to a boss, cost me my job, but I look back and I say I would do it all over again because I rest well at night knowing I did the right thing. But know your values. And don't compromise them because you'll never get those moments back.
Yeah, excellent. Nandita and then Ed?
Of course. I think it's also helpful to be proactive in offering solutions. So if you are saying no to something, but it's not just no, period. If it's no but here's the ways I've thought about how we can address this, you're at least pointing people in the right direction, even if you're not the right person to do it.
Yeah. Excellent. Ed?
I'm learning some about this in my current position, and the Space Force was created so lean and so small that the leadership at the very beginning said, you're not going to be able to do everything that the other service staffs do. You have my permission to say no. Now, if it's a relatively important issue and you say no, you have an obligation to let me make me aware that you've said no. And we practice that with, I think, the appropriate level of judgment. But what we've started to do now is when we don't have the capacity to do something and we say no, or we, send back a tasker that says we have no comments on this, we're keeping a list of that, because if there's no impact to us not doing it, that might be an unnecessary task or an unnecessary process.
Yep.
So we're informing, and we joke about that all the time. What if we just didn't do this? Would anybody notice?
Yeah.
Well, there's a lot of that in the Pentagon.
Yeah, I can think of a few other agencies that also there's a lot of that. Okay, so in a field, right, where trust and collaboration are paramount, what would you recommend to others about building and maintaining those relationships? And again, you're gonna get at least the coach. I'm gonna push you, one or two things that somebody could do about really building and maintaining relationships. And Ed, I will start this way and we'll go down.
I think there's three really key things about being an intelligence professional. And this probably goes beyond just intelligence. It certainly is all national security, but one is be willing to put in the work. We don't work on anything that's easy. I mean, we characterize some of our work as hard problems. So the first important characteristic is be willing to put in the work to do the job. Have a work ethic that is up to the task. What we do has great consequence. If you're not willing to work hard, and sometimes that means work long, this might not be for you. The second is we never work alone. We have to be good teammates. You have to build a reputation as being somebody that people want to work with. We might think alone, but we work together. So being a good teammate and building those kind of relationships and that reputation where people say, I want Bob to be on this team working this really hard problem with us. And then the third thing, particularly for intelligence people, is have an insane, insatiable curiosity about things. We have to be always learning. We have to be adapting. We have to be staying a step ahead. And if we ever become comfortable that we're in a good enough place and that we've achieved enough, that's not a recipe for success.
So I'm hearing definitely, if you're thinking of a place to start with your own team and being a really good team member. Get a reputation for being a really good team member. I'm also going to go back to your asking questions in your book. That's another way to build relationships. So Cliff, what would you say?
I think it has to be part of your hashtag. I think you have to be seen as a networker. If you're seen as a networker, people are going to want to work with you.
Yeah.
When you have the ability to go out and expand your awareness about something else that you're not really clear on, or gain experience by talking to someone else, people are going to want to work with you because they see you as someone that is curious, like Ed just said. A network's never done, and it needs constant nurturing. You have to remember that. You're never done. And then now, in the AI world, don't let ChatGPT become your only network.
Yeah. Excellent. Nandita.
Keep this quick. Do not devalue relationships with those who are your peers or below you in a pecking order.
Yes.
And second, don't treat relationships as transactional. I have too often seen recently people in a networking situation go directly to the person they perceive to be the most senior, think that if they just sweet talk enough, they'll just get a job, and they kind of forget all the middle parts that are involved in actually building, maintaining good relationships and sustaining those relationships. It's not as soon as something happens, you're done. It's a nurturing process.
Yeah, we're still the human element, even with the advent of AI and machine learning, and there is still a human element. At least I'm hoping so, right? So Andrew.
Within your circle of friends and networks, find those that you do trust and emulate those behaviors if you don't already naturally come with them. Study them and cultivate them.
Okay. Chris?
One of the most important things you do over the course of your career is not written down on paper, it's your whole file, right? Everything these folks were talking about up here is used to build that, right? It's the things that people talk about you when you're not there. It takes a long time to build, and it's very easy to screw up. And it takes some time to recover from that. So just remember the things that you're doing, somebody's keeping an eye on. So when you're looking for that new opportunity, or you're engaged with folks on an interview or job career search, just remember that there's going to be something that precedes you, and it's that whole file.
Yeah, and also, right, our community is small, whether it's private sector or in the government or military. Tish gave an example of that in the fireside chat this morning. Ended up working for somebody that she didn't want to work for before. Happens, right? Okay, so now really quickly, mentoring. Everybody says get a mentor. What is the one thing that you would recommend around where someone could begin? And particularly sometimes it's hard for introverts to do so, or depending on your personality. So where would you begin? Ed, one piece.
First, I would say there's probably no larger introvert in this room than me. I will match my introvert credentials with anybody.
100%.
I have had dozens, if not hundreds, of mentoring relationships. I have sought them out, and now people sometimes seek me out. I would say mentoring doesn't have to be the formal schedule a 1-hour session. I'm an advocate of micro-mentoring.
Oh, look at you coining a new phrase.
You know, a 5-minute conversation walking with somebody from one meeting to another.
Okay, all right, we're going to leave it there. Nandita's going to start the course. Okay, Cliff.
I think the most important thing is knowing what you want to get out of a mentor. Don't just come up to a mentor without a specific goal in mind. And knowing what you want to get out of a mentor will help you identify the best mentor for you.
You don't want to waste anybody's time.
Right.
That's exactly right. Nandita.
Start small. The best mentors I've had have been one level above me, a peer mentor, because they have been in your shoes not so in the near, like they've been there really recently, so they're able to really help you navigate, I think, the immediate challenges that you're facing.
Excellent. Andrew.
I'll just underscore Ed's point about micro-mentoring. Whether you're mentor or mentee, use those opportunities. They can be very valuable. Just minutes can be really important.
Absolutely.
I'll talk to what you mentioned earlier. It's not transactional, right? You're building a relationship with these folks. Hopefully it will last the rest of your career. So invest as much into it as you want them to invest in it as well.
Yeah. And I would also say, because people often think of mentoring, right, you're going to somebody more senior, is in those relationships, it can be dually beneficial, right? You can also mentor up, and there can be some co-learning that's happening that's really wonderful. So I think I'm at time. I want to thank the panel. I mean, like, rich experience.